In your everyday work, you are developing and demonstrating your communication skills and experience with a range of families. Sometimes this communication can be challenging and complex and will require you to draw on all your experience and skills to think how best to approach these conversations. Establishing a strong partnership with families and engaging in regular communication can help with these challenging conversations, conflicts, or disagreements. A partnership underpinned by good communication is a protective factor for children's mental health and well-being.
I think, all communication is based on relationships and, they're a matter of time, but also a bit of effort for both parties. And so in my experience, if my child has an educator who has made the effort to learn my name and say hello in the mornings and in the afternoons, to ask, how was your day? And to just give me a really brief understanding of what sort of day my child had, then that's something that, you naturally will sort of reciprocate with. And so that just becomes part of the relationship, that you get to know one another a little bit. And when you have that as a basis, then naturally you'll communicate about a whole range of things. And so if I feel that there's a problem that I need to talk about, or if I have a suggestion even, or if I want to provide feedback, it's also something that encourages me as a parent to provide feedback on what I'm seeing there, because I feel that the educator will take that well and they won't feel that I'm interfering or that I have opinions that I should keep to myself, that it's a pretty open and honest relationship. So I think that's really important.
There are a lot of barriers that can get in the way of communicating with families. The first one that most educators would probably say is time, that it takes time to communicate with families. I think another barrier is a one-size-fits-all approach, that if we just send an email, or if we just put it on the notice board, or if we just have a notice on the door, then we've done our job, and if they don't get it, then it's their fault. I think that can be a real barrier. Obviously, language barriers. I think the expectation that educators and lots of professionals have is, if I put the information out there one time, then they should remember it and they should know it, and it hardly ever works that way. I think that's a real barrier. Sometimes using jargon is a barrier, because every profession has its own professional language, and sometimes educators say things using professional language, and they think, well, parents will know what that means, and they don't.
Partnerships with families enable us to take the relationship that we have with families in relation to their children to new places, to a deeper place. And at times, families will encounter things, and children will have things happen to them that educators need to respond to, and vice versa. Educators will notice particular things about children that they need to engage with families, to talk about with families. When there is a strong partnership in place, those conversations are not easier, but more doable. They are able to take place. When there is no partnership in place, no respectful relationship, no commitment to shared decision making, then those difficult conversations are even more difficult. We do know that communication at times is complex though, and for educators, communicating sometimes difficult or complex things about children and their families is a challenge, and sometimes a bit frightening. But we need to practice the art. We need to practice the art of talking and listening regularly to families. And communication is a really important skill that we need to deliberately develop. And I know that some educator teams that I've worked with have actually spent time thinking about, what does effective communication look like? What sort of things would I say? How does my manner, what's my manner when I talk to families? What sort of things should I say? What shouldn't I say?
It is important that educators, if you're going to have a conversation with a family about something that maybe, is not going to be the easiest topic to talk about, I think it helps to think about how you're going to do that, and to develop those communication skills around how you talk about difficult conversations. I mean, it's easy to have a conversation about, how's your day been and what did you do on the weekend, and those kind of everyday sort of conversations. When we get into something that is a bit more involved, maybe a bit more, a bit more difficult, a bit more challenging for people, I think you do have to think about how you do that.
So in any emotional sorts of moments, good communication starts with a bit of self-reflection to think about how can I organise my own feelings and settle myself. Then I'm going to be more attentive and available to the other person. So that would be one of the principles of good communication.
And I think it's also recognising parents don't always necessarily want to hear what we have to say. And depending what it is we're talking about, but if we're talking about a concern about a child, maybe about their social emotional well-being, or how they're forming relationships, or their behaviour in relationships, for some parents that's a really hard thing to hear. It might be a really hard thing to hear because they haven't heard it before.
It will also give you, a partnership like that will give you the information you need to say, should I be doing this myself, or should I now pass this over to somebody else, or should I involve another professional in the conversation? Because often you don't necessarily have as an educator, you don't necessarily have all the expertise you need to be able to work with a particular family. And in fact, some of the difficult conversations that you might need to have with a family is indeed about, I need to now pass this on to somebody else to help with this process.